Hello, and welcome to the West Branch Kitchen for Flavor Bites. I'm Kendra, and today we'll be showing you how to make a surprisingly easy chocolate souffle. It's going to be very fancy and going to use relatively few ingredients. So let's go ahead and get started. So you'll need 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. This is usually about 60 to 65% dark chocolate. If you want it a little bit more bitter, go with a 70% dark chocolate. If you want it a little sweeter, maybe do like a 40% or 50% dark chocolate. You'll also need half a cup or 1 stick of butter, plus a little extra for coating your pan. 6 eggs separated. You're using both the yolks and the whites for this recipe. A 1/4 cup of sugar, plus a little extra for dusting your pan. A pinch of sea salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. The first thing we're going to do is finely chop our chocolate, or as fine as you can get it. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You're just going to take your knife and cut up your chocolate. It's going to break naturally, especially if you're using a darker chocolate. You might want to go back through and take some cuts this way, just to make sure your pieces are really fine. And we're just doing this because it's going to help the chocolate melt more evenly and a little bit more quickly to have it in smaller pieces rather than trying to melt 2 full bars of chocolate. And then once you have it chopped, you're just going to put it in your bowl. Once you have your chocolate all chopped, you're going to put the butter in the bowl with it, and then we are going to melt these 2 together. You can melt it a few different ways. You can do a double boiler, so if you're going to do that, it's very simple. You're just going to get a pot of simmering water, put your bowl on top, and then this is going to very gently and slowly melt the chocolate and the butter together. If you do it this way, make sure that you are using a heat-proof bowl. If you use plastic, there is a chance that it might melt, so I recommend using glass or stainless steel. You're also going to want to stir this every now and then just to make sure that the butter doesn't scorch, and keep it on a low temperature. You don't want the water to boil because it might burn your chocolate. So keep it on a low simmer. The other way you can do it is just by doing it in the microwave. If you're going to do this, just microwave it in about 30-second increments and stir it in between each go. So our chocolate is nice and melted and very glossy, which is what we want. Now we need this to cool a little bit before we put our egg yolks and salt in it. If you put it in while it's still too warm, the egg yolks are just going to cook and you're going to get scrambled eggs in your chocolate, which is gross. So while this is cooling, we're going to go ahead and work on whipping up our egg whites. So all we're going to do is add our cream of tartar to our 6 egg whites in this bowl and set it to mix. If you don't have a stand mixer like this, use a hand mixer. And we want this to get to foamy, soft peaks. And then we're going to incorporate our sugar about a tablespoon at a time. So our egg whites are looking nice and frothy. They're in that soft peak stage. So we're going to go ahead and start adding our sugar 1 tablespoon at a time. And we're going to continue to whip this and slowly add the sugar until the egg whites are nice and glossy and can hold a stiff peak. So you essentially want to make a meringue. So our egg whites are very nice and glossy and they are holding stiff peaks, which I'll show you what that means. So when something holds a stiff peak, basically, if I take this in here and try and scoop some up, this little point here is what we want. It's holding its shape very nicely. It's not running down the whisk at all. So this is perfect. This is what we want. So our egg whites are ready. We're just gonna set these aside for a second and go back to our chocolate. It's nice and cooled, but it's still slightly warm, which is what we want. This part's very easy. We're going to take our salt, put it into our egg yolks, take our egg yolks, put them into our chocolate, and we're just going to mix these together. As I said before, the reason you want your chocolate to cool after it's melted is because if you put the eggs into the chocolate while it's still really, really hot, you're going to have chocolatey scrambled eggs rather than a nice, smooth, velvety mixture. So by letting it cool slightly, we get rid of that risk. So now we're moving on to arguably the most important part of making a souffle and the hardest part. We're going to fold our egg whites into our chocolate mixture. Now souffles are known for rising quite a bit while they're baking, and for our souffle, the only rising agent we have are these egg whites. This is where all of our air is going to come from. So while we're folding it, we want to be very, very careful that we're not over mixing it and getting rid of all that air, otherwise our souffle is not going to rise. So first thing we're gonna do is whisk in about 1/4 of our egg white mixture. So measure it out as evenly as you can. In my case, I'm going to use my whisk to measure it. And because we're whisking this in, we still want to be gentle, but we don't have to be as gentle as we will need to be in a moment. This is to lighten up our chocolate mixture so that the actual folding is easier. That's incorporated, so now I'm going to switch tools and we're going to move on to a nice flexible rubber spatula. This is going to make folding quite a bit easier. So we're going to fold our egg whites in 2 additions. When you fold something, you always incorporate the lighter mixture into the heavier. You don't typically, unless a recipe states to, fold the heavier thing, so in this case our chocolate mix, into the lighter thing because it's going to deflate it almost immediately. So to fold, we're going to run our spatula around and kind of just bring it over. Again, being very gentle. This part of the process is going to take the longest, just because you want all of those egg whites incorporated, but you don't want to move too fast because then you will deflate your mixture. Okay, so our first incorporation of the egg whites is fully incorporated into our chocolate mixture. I don't see any major streaks of white, so we're going to go ahead and add the second helping of egg whites. So same thing as before, very gently take your spatula around the outside and fold it over. A lot of cooks cross in the middle just to help the incorporation a little bit more. So I'm also doing that. So we have all of our egg whites incorporated into our chocolate mixture. There's no white streaks, it's still nice and fluffy, so hopefully we'll get a good rise in the oven. Now we just need to put it into our prepared pan. If you don't have a souffle pan, you can use what we're using today, which is just a high-walled cake pan. You just want something a little bit taller to support the rise. So we're going to very gently put this into our pan. Our pan is coated with butter and sugar on all sides. So again, very, very gently. We don't want it to like plop into the pan. We want to just kind of coax it in, and then it will do what it needs to do in the oven. And try and get all of the batter in there. And you can try and smooth it out as best as you can, but again, you want to be very, very gentle because you don't want to get rid of any of that air from our egg whites. Now, what we're going to do, as soon as I get this last little bit in here, is take our clean thumb and run it around the inside of the pan to just kind of separate the batter from the pan and help it rise. Okay, now we are ready to put this in our preheated oven. Now we're going to put our souffle on the sheet, close up the door, and lower the oven temperature to 375. And we're going to set our timer for 25 minutes to start. You can cook it for 25 to about 35 minutes, but it is very important that you don't open the oven for the first 20. Our souffle is out of the oven. We know it's done because it has a slight jiggle to the middle when we jiggle the pan, so that's a good sign. That's what we want. It should be nice and soft and spongy. Now, you might notice that our souffle has not risen out of the pan. That's fine. This is a very wide and tall pan, so the proportions for the batter aren't quite right to get that dramatic over the edge rise, but it's still going to be delicious. We're going to put this on a plate and serve it warm. And there we have it, some delicious and surprisingly easy chocolate souffle. Now, one thing with chocolate souffle, it is, because it's so deceivingly simple, it's an easy thing to kind of troubleshoot. So if you're not happy with your rise, you know that you probably overfolded the egg whites and you can just try again. If it's a little too firm, you know you probably cooked it a little bit too long. So I definitely encourage you to try this recipe and experiment and get your souffle just to your liking. You can serve this warm with whipped cream, some custard, some chocolate sauce. It's going to be delicious no matter how you serve it. So I hope you enjoyed this video and give this souffle a try. Bye! That's so good. Make it. Make the souffle.